Hi everyone, it's me, Johnny, back again with another story for the boys and girls that Jesus told from the Bible. So if you want to read this story for yourself that we're going to think about today, you can find it in Matthew chapter 7 and verses 24 through to 27. But before we start, I've got a question for you. What do you think is the most important part of a house? Maybe you think it's the walls, or maybe you think it's a certain room. Maybe you think your house wouldn't be the same without the kitchen, because where would you make food? Or maybe it wouldn't be the same without a bathroom, because where would you get washed? But actually, the most important part of a house is a thing called the foundations. And the foundations are the bit at the bottom that go into the ground, and that keeps the house nice and stable and secure. So if the foundations aren't very good, the whole house isn't going to be very good. But if the foundations are strong and firm, the whole house will be strong and firm. So Jesus tells a story about two different men, and they're building some houses. Now, they're building them in two very different materials on the ground. One man is trying to build his house on rock, and the other one is trying to build his house on sand. Now, both men worked hard, put in lots and lots of effort into building their houses. They built and they built and they built. They each put up 4 walls. They put in windows and doors. They put a roof on top. They worked and worked and worked on their houses. And finally, they were complete. These houses were great. But there was trouble to come. You see, a storm came along. Rain came down, and more rain came down, and even more rain came down. So much rain that the rivers were running through the streets. And there was wind, first a little breeze, then a few bigger gusts, and then huge, big blasts of wind beating at the houses. It was a huge storm. Now, when the water had disappeared, what do you think happened? Well, the house built on the sand, it was swept away. The sandy ground was nowhere near strong enough to keep the house secure, and whenever the water came, it just washed everything away. But the house that was built on the rock, it stood completely firm. The ground was strong and kept the house secure. Then Jesus said about these two men in this story that he told, that the man who built his house on the rock was wise, and the man who built his house on the sand was foolish. He was silly. His house was never going to stand up to the rain and to the storms. So Jesus told this story to some people who he had been teaching, and he was teaching them all about God. And Jesus said to the people that if they ignored what he had taught them about God, and they didn't obey God's commands and didn't do what he said, then they would be like the foolish man. Imagine you went to the doctor and you told him everything that was wrong with you, and he said, here's something to make you better. And you just ignored what he said. That wouldn't be very smart, would it? Of course it wouldn't. It would be really silly. And in the same way, if we ignore what God says and tells us in the Bible, that would be really silly. It would be foolish for us to ignore what Jesus says. But he said that if the people listened to his words and obeyed his commands and did what he said, they would be like the wise man who built his house on the rock. They would have a firm foundation in the middle of a storm, so that everything they built wouldn't be washed away. And you see, Jesus tells us in the Word, in the Bible, that he is the way, he is the firm foundation that we should build our lives on. He is the rock. He is the rock that keeps us firm and secure, even in the middle of all of these storms. And Jesus tells us that in his Word, the one way to be safe and secure is to be found in him. And that means simply that we trust him. We trust in Jesus, and we trust in what he has done for us. You see, Jesus died on the cross for me and for you. And by doing that, he makes us right with God. It's as if all of the sin, all of the wrong things we've done, it's all forgiven by God if we trust that Jesus has died for us and he's our friend. And that is the wisest thing that we can do. If we want to be like the wise man in this story, we need to trust in Jesus. We need to listen to what he says and in his words and believe it and then do it. And that way, whenever the storms come, whenever everything seems to be crumbling around us, we can be safe and secure. We know that we are safe because we are trusting in Jesus. He is the firm foundation, and by listening to him and obeying him and listening to what he tells us, and most importantly, trusting in Jesus, that is how we can be wise, and that is how we can be found safe and secure in the middle of the storms. So that is another story that Jesus told. So hopefully you can share that with all of your friends and your family. So until I'm back on again, I'll see you soon. Stay safe. Bye.